Imagine a silent, high-altitude theater of war. 30,000 feet above the surface of the Earth, a machine representing the absolute zenith of human engineering slices through the thin air. This is the F-35 Lightning II. It costs $150 million. Its skin is coated in radar-absorbent materials, so advanced they are considered state secrets. Inside the cockpit, the pilot wears a helmet worth $400,000 that allows him to see through the very floor of the aircraft. This jet is a computer with wings, a 21st century apex predator designed for a digital battlefield that did not even exist in the dreams of the previous generation. But look closer at the umbilical cord, connecting this marvel to another aircraft. Look at the refueling boom extending from a massive 4-engine tanker. That tanker is not a digital marvel. It is not stealthy. It is not modern. It is the KC-135 Stratotanker. It was designed when Dwight Eisenhower was the President of the United States. Its blueprints were drawn by hand on drafting tables using slide rules and pencils. The very aircraft currently pumping fuel into the world's most expensive fighter jet was likely manufactured in the late 1950s or early 1960s. This is a jarring, cold reality of modern global power. The pinnacle of 21st century military technology is completely and utterly tethered to a 69-year-old Cold War relic. Without this flying gas station from the mid-20th century, the American air fleet is essentially grounded. This is the KC-135. It is the indispensable backbone of United States global power projection. Since its first flight in 1956, it has been the silent partner in every major global conflict. From the humid skies over Vietnam to the freezing air of the Cold War North Pole, and from the deserts of Iraq to the modern strategic corridors of Eastern Europe and the Pacific. It is a plane that refuses to die, primarily because the United States military-industrial complex has found it physically and economically harder to kill than to replace. These planes are currently circling over high-stakes regions, ensuring that American presence is felt even thousands of miles from the nearest friendly base. They are the unseen veins through which the lifeblood of the Air Force flows. A constant reminder that even the most advanced technology requires basic, reliable support. Walk into any United States Air Force maintenance hangar, and you will see a strange sight. You will see technicians who are 19 or 20 years old. They are members of Generation Z, raised with smartphones and high-speed internet. Yet, they spend their days and nights turning wrenches on airframes that were built when their grandfathers were in high school. These technicians are often younger than the smallest, most insignificant components they are replacing. They are the caretakers of a zombie fleet, maintaining a massive force of hundreds of tankers that are slated to continue flying into the 2040s and beyond. This requires a level of specialized craftsmanship that is becoming a lost art in the modern world. This creates a profound sense of intellectual discomfort for military planners and taxpayers alike. How is it possible that the world's most advanced and well-funded Air Force relies on a legacy asset that belongs in a museum? The discomfort grows when you realize that this is not a choice made out of nostalgia. It is a choice born of necessity. We are witnessing a systemic incapacity to move forward. The story of the KC-135 is not just a story of a great airplane. It is a story about the decay of industrial speed, the rising cost of complexity, and the dangerous bottleneck that exists at the heart of American defense. When you step inside a KC-135, the first thing that hits you is the smell. It is a heavy, metallic scent. It is the unmistakable aroma of hydraulic fluid, aged rubber, and old aluminum that has been stressed by decades of atmospheric pressure. There are no touchscreens here. There are no sleek, integrated glass cockpits like the ones found in the F-35. Instead, the pilots are surrounded by a forest of analog gauges. These are physical needles that bounce and flicker. There are heavy mechanical levers that require actual muscle to move. The cockpit feels thick and mechanical, like a heavy industrial machine from a bygone era of steel and rivets. It is a space where the 1950s never truly ended. The airframe itself groans and pops as it levels off at 30,000 feet. It is a physical sensation of history. You can feel the vibrations of engines that have been swapped and upgraded over the decades, but the bones of the plane remain the same. It is a testament to the metallurgy of the 1950s, a time when engineers built things to last because they did not have the computer modeling to know exactly how thin they could make the metal before it failed. They over-engineered everything. They built margins of safety into the wings and the fuselage that modern bean counters would find wasteful. And yet, it is that very wastefulness, that excess of structural integrity, that keeps these planes in the air today. They represent a different philosophy of manufacturing, one where physical durability was the primary metric of success. The world outside is moving toward artificial intelligence, autonomous drones, and hypersonic missiles. But inside this aluminum tube, the primary technology is a long metal pole and a human being lying on their stomach in the back of the plane, looking through a window to guide a fuel nozzle into a moving target. It is a blue-collar job in a white-collar military. This human-centric approach is becoming increasingly rare in an age of automated precision. But for the Stratotanker, it is simply the way things have been done for nearly 7 decades. And then there is the math that simply does not add up. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The financial and industrial mathematics behind this plane are as fascinating as they are terrifying. We are spending billions of dollars to keep these 69-year-old planes in the air, while the supposed replacements are failing to meet the basic requirements of the mission. We have reached an inversion point where the past is more reliable than the future, and where the costs of progress are starting to outweigh the benefits. The tension between what we need and what we can actually produce is reaching a breaking point that could redefine the future of American air power. In an era where we can build a jet that thinks for itself, we seem unable to build a simple tank to keep it fueled. To understand how we became so dependent on this aging giant, we must look back at a time when the American industrial machine moved with a speed that seems almost supernatural today. In the early 1950s, the world was entering a dangerous new era of nuclear brinkmanship. The United States Air Force needed a way to keep its long-range bombers in the air for days at a time, circling the borders of the Soviet Union. This requirement birthed the Boeing -80, a prototype that would eventually split into 2 distinct paths: the Boeing 707, which revolutionized commercial air travel, and the KC-135 Stratotanker. The most shocking part of this history is the timeline. The first Stratotanker went from a design on a drafting board to a functional aircraft in only 3 years. In that era, the defense industrial base was a sprawling, muscular entity capable of producing thousands of aircraft a year. There was an abundance of raw materials, a massive workforce skilled in heavy manufacturing, and a national urgency that pushed engineering to its limits. This was an era of industrial abundance, where the goal was to build as much as possible, as fast as possible. Compare that 1950s speed to the modern nightmare of the KC-46 Pegasus. We have replaced the slide rule with supercomputers and the drafting table with advanced digital modeling. Yet the process of building a simple tanker has become an agonizing, decades-long ordeal. The KC-46 was supposed to be the successor that finally retired the KC-135. Instead, it has become a case study in the replacement trap. While the original engineers built the Stratotanker in 3 years, the Pegasus has been mired in delays and technical failures for over 20 years. This is not just a story of corporate mismanagement. It is a story of how our capacity to build has withered even as our designs have become more sophisticated. We have traded industrial muscle for bureaucratic complexity and specialized scarcity. In our pursuit of the perfect aircraft, we have lost the ability to produce a functional one on schedule. The details of the Pegasus failure are staggering. Boeing, a titan of aviation, entered into a fixed-price contract that has resulted in billions of dollars in losses for the company. But for the Air Force, the cost is measured in lost capability. The new plane suffers from what are known as Category 1 deficiencies. These are not minor bugs. They are critical flaws that prevent the aircraft from performing its primary mission safely. The most notorious issue is the remote vision system. In the old KC-135, a human boom operator lies on their stomach in the back of the plane and looks through a real window at the receiver aircraft. It is a physical, direct connection that has worked for 7 decades. In the new Pegasus, The operator sits in the front of the plane and looks at a digital screen fed by a suite of cameras. This shift from physical to digital should have been an upgrade, but in reality, the cameras often distort the image, making it difficult for the operator to judge distances accurately. On sunny days, the glare can blind the system. At night, shadows can create optical illusions that confuse the sensors. If the refueling boom accidentally strikes the stealth coating of a $150 million F-35 because the operator could not see clearly, the damage is catastrophic. This is the irony of modern procurement. We have replaced a simple, reliable piece of glass with a multi-million-dollar array of sensors and software that is often less effective than the human eye. The simplicity of the 1950s metallurgy and design has proven to be more resilient than the over-engineered smart systems of today. We are finding that high-definition cameras are no substitute for direct line of sight. This leads us to a deeper, more systemic problem which we can call industrial incapacity. During the Cold War, the United States had dozens of major aerospace companies competing for contracts. Today, after decades of mergers and consolidations, that number has shrunk to just a few massive conglomerates. We have lost the economy of scale that once made American manufacturing the envy of the world. In the 1950s, if a part broke, there were 10 different factories that could potentially make a new one. Today, many of the companies that forged the original components for the KC-135 no longer exist. The blueprints are sometimes lost in old archives, and the specialized alloys used in the airframe are no longer in mass production. We are now living through what historians might call the inversion. This is the point where our most advanced weapon systems are held hostage by the scarcity of the very things they were meant to replace. The defense industrial base is now so specialized and so lean that it lacks the surge capacity to handle modern problems. When a modern aircraft needs a specialized part, it can take months or even years to procure through a convoluted supply chain. Meanwhile, the maintenance crews for the KC-135 are forced to engage in a form of industrial archaeology. They scavenge parts from planes sitting in the desert boneyards of Arizona. They cannibalize one aging airframe to keep another flying in the air. It is a desperate manual process that stands in stark contrast to the high-tech image the military projects to the world. What happens when the gas station in the sky finally cracks? This is the question that haunts every strategic planner in the Pentagon. The entire American global reach is built on a foundation of shifting sand. Our ability to strike targets on the other side of the planet, to deter regional powers, and to protect our allies depends entirely on the structural integrity of 7-decade-old aluminum. If the KC-135 fleet ever suffers a fleet-wide grounding due to a newly discovered fatigue crack or a systemic engine failure, the United States military effectively shrinks overnight. It becomes a regional force, unable to project power beyond the range of its land-based fuel tanks. This fragility is a silent threat that grows every year the fleet remains in service. The vulnerability is not just technical, it is economic and human. We are trapped in a cycle where we cannot afford to fix the new planes and we cannot afford to stop flying the old ones. The specialized craftsmanship required to maintain the Stratotanker is a dying trade. As the older generation of master mechanics retires, they take with them the unwritten knowledge of how these planes breathe and move. We are watching the slow sunset of an industrial era, and the horizon is looking increasingly dark. The bottleneck of American air power is not the stealth of the fighter or the range of the missile. It is the simple, humble, and ancient act of passing fuel through a tube at 30,000 feet. Without that connection, the most powerful military in history is just a collection of very expensive museum pieces. The strategic vulnerability of the United States military is now concentrated in a single airframe that predates the internet and the microchip. This is the bottleneck effect in its most dangerous form. If the KC-135 fleet were to disappear tomorrow, the entire doctrine of American power projection would effectively evaporate. Our most advanced assets, like the F-22 Raptor and the upcoming B-21 Raider, are marvels of stealth and lethality, but they have exceptionally short operational ranges. Without the constant looming presence of the Stratotanker, these high-tech machines are essentially short-range defensive tools, restricted to the immediate vicinity of their runways. They are like thoroughbred racehorses tethered to a very short leash. The global deterrent that prevents major conflict in places like the South China Sea or the frontiers of Europe is not a stealth coating or a quantum computer. It is the availability of hundreds of thousands of pounds of jet fuel transferred through a metal boom in the dead of night over a remote ocean. If an adversary were to target these aging tankers, the entire American air wing would be grounded or forced to return to base, leaving the sky open to the enemy. This aircraft is the silent thread holding the fabric of global security together. Keeping this zombie fleet alive comes at a staggering human and financial cost that the public rarely sees. For every single hour a KC-135 spends in the sky, maintenance crews must spend at least 20 to 30 hours on the ground performing what can only be described as complex surgical interventions. These youthful maintenance technicians are working on machines that are 3 times their age, navigating systems that were designed before their parents were born. They are not simply swapping out digital modules or plugging in diagnostic tablets like they would for a modern jet. Instead, they are engaged in a specialized form of craftsmanship that more closely resembles the work of a master watchmaker or a restorer of ancient monuments. They must listen for the specific metallic groan of a 60-year-old landing gear assembly and feel for the subtle vibrations in a wing spar that has survived the turbulence of 7 decades of flight. They rely on paper manuals with yellowed edges because digital models for some of these components simply do not exist. This is a labor of love and necessity, performed in hangars that smell of hydraulic fluid and old aluminum. The financial reality of this dependence is equally grim and unsustainable. Because many of the original aerospace manufacturers went out of business or merged into oblivion decades ago, the Air Force often has to pay exorbitant prices for custom-made replacement parts. When a specialized valve or a specific alloy bracket fails, there's no assembly line ready to produce a new one. This often forces the military to rely on the scavenging of the boneyards in the Arizona desert. There is a deep, quiet irony in the fact that the most technologically advanced military force in human history must regularly send recovery teams to strip parts from the sun-bleached carcasses of planes that were retired during the Reagan administration. This is the legacy asset trap. We have invested so much in the complexity and sophistication of our frontline fighters that we have neglected the basic industrial capacity to build the support structures they need to survive. We are spending billions of dollars to keep a relic from the 1950s airworthy because we have lost the systemic capability to build a simple, reliable successor in a reasonable time frame. We are paying a premium to maintain our past because we cannot afford our future. This situation leads us to a profound philosophical reflection on the current state of American industrial decay. We are not keeping the KC-135 in service because we have a sentimental attachment to the past or a respect for its long history. We are keeping it because we have lost the capacity to do otherwise. The industrial hollowing that has impacted the American economy is clearly visible in the cramped analog cockpit of the Stratotanker. We have traded the raw manufacturing muscle and the rapid prototyping of the mid-20th century for a brittle, hyper-specialized defense sector that struggles to produce even basic hardware on a predictable timeline. The KC-135 remains a flying testament to an era when the United States could design, test, and mass-produce a world-changing platform in less than 3 years. Today, we are lucky if the bureaucratic process can finalize a contract for a replacement in that same amount of time. We have optimized for profit and administrative oversight while losing the ability to actually build things at scale. The simplicity of the 1950s has become a luxury we can no longer replicate in an age of complexity and institutional gridlock. There is an unavoidable inevitability to this narrative. We are watching the slow sunset of an industrial era, and the horizon is looking increasingly uncertain. The bottleneck of American air power is not the stealth of the fighter or the range of the cruise missile. It is the simple, humble, and ancient act of passing fuel through a tube at 30,000 feet. As the master mechanics who understand these planes begin to retire, they take with them the unwritten knowledge of how these aluminum giants breathe and move. We are entering a future where the ultra-modern is permanently and perhaps fatally tethered to the ancient. The F-35 Lightning II will continue to receive software updates and advanced sensor suites, but it will always be dependent on a 69-year-old flying fuel tank that relies on physical cables and pulleys. This is the invisible ceiling of modern military ambition. We are moving faster and faster toward a future that we can only reach if the ghost of the 1950s stays in the sky. This is not just a story about a plane. It is a story about the fragility of a global system that has forgotten how to maintain its foundations. It is a fragile piece, held together by hydraulic fluid, old aluminum, and the tireless hands of technicians who refuse to let the past die. If you want to understand the true state of global power and the industrial shifts that define our current era, we invite you to subscribe and follow our ongoing investigation into these hidden foundations of the modern world. Our next exploration will take us even deeper into the scrapyard economy, where the remnants of the Cold War are being resurrected for a conflict they were never meant to see. We will look at the last of the B-52 bombers and the struggle to keep them flying into the next century. In the race for the future, we have discovered that we cannot afford to leave the past behind. The Stratotanker will fly on, a reminder that in an age of digital perfection, sometimes the old ways are the only ways we have left to keep the world moving forward. Our progress is bound to our history, and the fuel of tomorrow is still carried in the vessels of yesterday.